Hey guys, I'm Andy, and today we're going to be talking about the different values of the economy in Masters of Mutanite, particularly how the different cards were designed and balanced. So in the game, you know that the goal is to get your opponent down to 0 life from 50. So sort of the most basic building block of the economy is 1 damage, right? So if you look on the left here, you're going to see that I've expressed a lot of the different abilities in the game as damage. So even the ones that don't deal damage directly are worth some damage amount because they're always getting you towards dealing damage to your opponent. Looking here at Tabletop Simulator, you start with a couple of starting cards. So you have like Punch that deals 2 damage, that's a melee attack. And then you have Range that is a throw, and that's a range attack. So again, for melee attacks, you have to be in your opponent's zone. For ranged, you can be 1 zone away orthogonally or diagonally. So we know that these are kind of like, them being starting cards makes them a place for us to get somewhere to start our values from. And we know that that Fling is going to be worth about 2.5 damage. That's where I value it at, because a lot of the objects in the game, if you look at like Tree, it deals 2 damage, Water Tower is 2 damage and water, which is worth about 0.5. Cars, like 1 damage and then 1 fire, which is 1 damage. So they're worth about 2, and then later in the game, they get to be worth a little bit more as the board becomes more dangerous and you have more things to synergize with them. So we know that Throw is worth about 2.5, which is more than Punch's 2. And take that for a second, put it aside. Now, the way that you get around in the game is by discarding cards from your hand. And so that's going to let you dash from one zone into another. And so then we know that Dash is worth about 2.5, because what are those cards you're going to be throwing away? Well, they're the starter cards. And it's better to use the one that's worth more in that regard. And is also a better average of your 4 starting cards, because there's also the pickup and the cleanse card that have some value to them. So we can start there on the left here with saying, okay, Throw is worth 2.5, Dash is worth 2.5. And then we can start looking at, so normally all of these cards that are in front of me here are put into the zones, so they kind of sit in this slot and you pick them up as you move around the board. And the different melee cards are going to be worth about 6 value, and the different ranger cards are going to be worth about 4.5. So why are ranged worth less than the melee? Oh, because they don't require you to dash. So a lot of times the melee, let's say that you're in a different zone here. If I wanted to actually play, my example here is like if I'm playing 2 melee cards, I have to dash in and then play those 2 melee. So the dash is part of the cost, so the melee needs to compensate for that. What I'm saying here is, setting aside the 2.5 for a second, if I dash and play 2 melee cards, that's 3 cards I'm playing in order to get 12 damage, because each of those melee is worth 6. That's going to average out to about 4 per card. Versus ranged, if I just play 2 range cards and it results in 9 damage, then it's 4.5 per card. So you kind of need to figure out how to eke out more of that value when you're playing these cards. Now, one thing to point out is that you don't always need to dash in order to get into your opponent's zone. They might actually be in your zone from the last turn because they were playing melee attacks on you. So a lot of these values are like, it's the game's trying to be perfectly balanced, but really it's your job as a player, I have a note down here, to like optimize beyond these values and figure out how you can rise above the economy. So I'm going to go into or actually, I'll kind of talk again about these like 6 and 4.5 values. So we can see here that when we're designing a card that, let's look at like Ground Pound, for example. This is a melee attack because we have the fist icon. It deals 4 damage, so we know it already has a value of 4. And then it says you may move your target 1 zone. So basically you're forcing them out of the zone. we can see that a dash is worth about 2.5. So here, if you add those together, then this is worth about 6.5 because you're doing the 4 and then you're like forcing them out. You're telling them where to dash to. So it's worth about 6.5. It's not the exact 6 that a melee card is always worth, but I usually think it's fine if cards are within about 0.5 range. Then we can look at a range card that's worth 4.5, and actually this is going to start getting into our elements. So if we look at something like, yeah, we'll get into a few of them here. So Fireball is a ranged attack. So we know it has to deal 4.5. It already deals 2 damage. And then Fire, I value at 2. So this is worth about 4. And then, because it has a boost on the bottom, this is an ability that you can pay Mutanite for, I actually build that into the card cost. So I'm saying I'm okay with Fireball being worth only 4 because you can actually pay to get it to deal more damage. And I'll get back to like how those boosts are valued in a bit. But yeah, so Fire is worth 2. And it's worth 2 because even though Fire deals 1 damage per fire in zone when you're putting it in there, a lot of times late game it's dealing like 3 or 4 when you do that. So again, these are like averages over the course of the game. Then we can look at something like Frost. So Frost over here, if you remember, is it attaches to you and it's 1 damage per Frost, like when it's given to you, and it limits your dash to be orthogonal only. So it's kind of this dual ability. So we can look for a Frost ability here and say something like Petrify. So we know it's a melee ability, so it's going to be worth 6. It's already deals 2 damage, and then Frost is worth 2.5, so it's 4.5 total, and Poison is worth about 1.5. So this is like a perfectly balanced melee card because it's worth 6. And that's going to lead us into our next one. Poison I have over here at 1.5. So Poison deals you 1 damage when it's this card that goes into your deck, but it can actually cycle through and deal you another damage if you don't cleanse it in time, and actually like it'll just keep dealing you damage if you don't cleanse it out of your deck. So I value it at about 1.5 because a lot of times it will deal 2 damage. And yeah, so we can look at something like Poison Pitch here for that. So we know it's a ranged attack, it's going to deal 4.5, so the throw is worth 2.5 and the poison is worth 1.5 for a total of 4. So again, this one's a little bit undervalued, but still within like that 0.5 flex range. Then we can look at Electricity. So Electricity is worth 2.5. The ability deals 2 damage, and then it's 1 per water in zone on top of that 2. And a lot of times that's going to occur, especially late game. So we can look at something like Heat Shock here, which is worth 4.5 because it's ranged. So it's 2 for the fire and then 2.5 for the electricity. So again, this is like a perfectly balanced card. Next we have Water over here, which I value at 0.5. So this is because it doesn't really do anything by itself. It just amplifies electricity and then also specific powers and traits. So something like Heal is going to get you more life per water in your zone. Or Acid Rain, for example, is going to deal more poison to your opponent if there's more water in their zone. So an example of this is like Tsunami. It's a melee attack, so it's going to deal 6. So we see it deals 4 damage, plus it's got 2 water in there. So that's going to make it worth about 5 because, again, I cost having a boost on the card at 1. So that's all the total that amounts to 6 value for Tsunami. And actually, I'll jump into boost a little bit now. So boost, the way that they work is you pay Mutanite and you get that ability. If you pay more Mutanite, you're going to get a better ability out of it. Generally, they're worth about 2 in terms of conversion. So each Mutanite in the game is worth some value. And so in this case, I'm saying if you pay a Mutanite, I'm going to let you move your target and the water to any zone. And so this is worth, like this one is valued at about a dash because you're moving them out which is like 2.5. So it's a little bit better than normal than the regular Mutanite conversion. But a lot of times, because you're playing melee, you don't want to move them out of the zone. So this one has kind of a more specialized build that's kind of balanced between melee and ranged to get it to work. To look at another boost ability, here's an interesting one. So Sonic Scream should be worth 4.5. We see it's just a ranged attack of 3 damage, which means it's undervalued by 1.5. Even though it has a boost ability on it for 1, it's still, like, I consider that a bit, like, yes, it's within that flex range of 0.5, but it feels weak. So what's unique about it is it's going to be 1 Mutanite per 1 damage, or sorry, 1 Mutanite, and it give you 1 damage per object in the zone. We know that each zone starts with 2 in there. And so this is a cool one because you can, synergize other stuff with this pretty easily, generally throwing objects into their zone beforehand. So this is an easy one to kind of elevate above that 2 damage. Especially late in the game when there's like a bunch of objects built up in a zone, it's easier to get your Sonic Scream to trigger for more than that like 1 Mutanite to 2 damage conversion. Okay, so yeah, I know that's a lot I'm kind of laying on here, but I figured it would be good to jump into some of the meat. Similar to Sonic Scream, we have Earthquake here, which is kind of a more extreme ability, so it's going to be worth 6 because it's melee, and it's 5 damage, and so the other 1 point there is built into having a boost on the card. And so here we're paying 2 to get 2 per object in the zone, so a very similar conversion as the Sonic Scream, just scaled up there. Let's see if there's any other examples to bring up. Okay, so reactions we haven't talked about. So a reaction is a card with this yellow burst behind it that you can play on your turn to counter that type of attack. So like Super Speed here would counter a melee attack coming at you, canceling their attack and letting you use your Super Speed ability. So reactions I value at 2.5. So if we look here and we say, okay, actually this is kind of a weird ability that we'll come back to in a second. Static Field is kind of simpler. So here I say the reaction is worth 2.5, and then the electricity is worth 2.5. So this is 5, and it's a ranged attack, so we know it's about 4.5. So similar ability, you could say, okay, so Teleport is 2.5 for the reaction, and then 2.5 for the dash. And even though it's to any zone, you're probably still just going to dash 1. It might be worth like a little bit more than that, but generally I tend to just be generous with dashing to any zone because it's, like you're only going to use it maybe 1/3 of the time to go more than 1 zone, especially in 2-player where the board is smaller. Cards that have like an or ability, they tend to hold some value in the or, like the fact that you can do one or the other means that that flexibility is worth something on the card. All right, so if you guys have any questions or comments, please let me know. I think there are, a couple of cards that could still be balanced a little better. For example, like Gas Form is like 2.5 and 1.5, and it's got that barrel ability, but actually like it might be a little bit off by like 1 damage. So there's still opportunity to balance the cards better, but that's about it. And I think next time we'll get into the trait cards and talk about how they give you value over time, because that's sort of the other side of this, is that you can use your Mutanite to boost and get the immediate effect and value out of it, or you can spend your Mutanite on the traits that give you the value over time. And of course, later in the game, they're going to be worth less because there's just less time left in the game. Okay, thanks guys. Bye.